Join women passionate about agriculture and food at the upcoming Advancing Women in Agriculture Conference being held on March 16th through 18th, 2025 at the Hyatt Regency in Calgary, Alberta. Re-energize and re-engage while listening to leaders in the food and agriculture industry tell their stories. Network and make connections while learning tips that will help you meet your goals. For more information and to register, head to the link in today's show notes. Hi, I'm Caitlin Dubin, and this is the Rural Woman Podcast. I'm a first-generation farmer who married into agriculture. Born and raised in a city, I was so unfamiliar with where my food came from, but I was determined to figure it out. Through my journey into agriculture, I saw women who were strong but humble, often taking a back seat. To me, these women were leaders who deserved a seat at the table. I created the Rural Woman Podcast to share the voices of women in an industry whose stories often went untold. The rural entrepreneurs who live and breathe their work, full of grit and pride. We come here to share our stories, to be in community with each other, to be challenged and inspired, but most importantly, to be celebrated and to be heard. We may not all live, farm, ranch, or homestead the same, but we are all connected. We are rural women, and our stories are worthy of being told. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Rural Woman Podcast. Today you'll meet Ashley Perepelkin. From city life to cattle ranching, Ashley's journey has been anything but conventional. Raised in a city, farming wasn't on her bingo card, but today she's a successful rancher, entrepreneur, and advocate for farming. In this episode, Ashley shares her transition into the cattle industry, the realities of farm-to-table beef production, and her latest venture into tallow skincare. We dive into the importance of transparency in agriculture, the role of mentorship, and what it truly takes to build a thriving farm business. Plus, Ashley opens up about the freedom and fulfillment she has found in her rural life. Without further ado, my friends, let's get to this week's episode with Ashley. Ashley, welcome to the Rural Woman Podcast. How are you today?
I am so good. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. The pleasure is all mine for chatting with you. And I feel like I'm not at work today. I'm just sitting here having a cup of coffee with my girlfriend, Ashley. So I'm excited.
Do you ever feel like you're at work?
Some days. Yeah. But usually that's if I'm recording an ad or things like that, I feel like I'm at work. But this part is the fun part of podcasting. And the marketing and the editing and all of those things, like that's the work stuff that we don't talk about. So
Exactly.
Ashley, for those who are unfamiliar with you, give us your background, tell us who you are, where you're from, and how you got your start in agriculture.
Yeah, so my name is Ashley Perepelkin. I am a mother of 4 beautiful children. I joke that they're like my little spawns of Satan. They are my feral 4. I kind of came into agriculture in a weird roundabout way. I was 19 years old when I met a boy and fell in love. I was born and raised in the city. I had rode horses competitively in the English industry, show jumping and competing in eventing, but I never did have the true agriculture knowledge, experience, or anything. That's kind of how it all started, was I met a boy and fell in love.
And this boy was a farmer.
He was a farmer, yes. So it is a family farm, and I kind of always struggle with the explanation of it. So his grandfather farmed, and his mom and dad did have cattle until about 2008. And then kind of BSE hit, all production on the cattle side stopped. At one point, my husband's grandfather passed away, so then the farm was rented out. He did not decide to start farming until he was 18. is when he really decided, okay, I'm going to get back into it. So although he was born and raised a farmer, he had a slower start at it himself as well. So yeah, that's kind of how it started. We started with, I believe there was only about 200 acres that he was farming in grainland. And I remember our first few date nights were like me sitting on the side of this old combine that didn't have a buddy seat. And like, but it was, at 19, I was just like swooning. Like it was amazing. We have since very much expanded the operation.
And maybe reality has came in a little bit of the romance of no buddy seat.
Yes.
So obviously you were quite young when this all started. Looking back, what were your future plans for a career or basically a life that was before farming?
I never really had one. I was I call it like my midlife crisis, which at 17 to 19, I know like it's not midlife because I'm already past that. But anyways, I went to college. I was 17 years old. So some kind of personal stuff happened. My mom was going through a separation with my stepdad at the time. I was very much a argumentative, now, turning 18-year-old. I found myself in the bars drinking a lot. So I kind of just had a moment when I was in the summer of my 18-year-old year. I was like, I need to get out, but I had already paid for college. So then after college, I had a little Sunfire car at the time, and I basically packed my car and I moved to Weyburn, Saskatchewan to go work at an equine training facility. And the removal of myself kind of like from friends, family, Alberta, everything was really, really good for me. When I came home, I very quickly got another job at a car dealership because that's what I was comfortable with. I knew I could really get back into it quickly. And at that moment in time is when a friend that I had made while working at this new dealership introduced me to Andrew. So it was a blind date. We met at Tim Hortons. And at this point, I was so open. I didn't have roots anywhere. I wasn't grounded anywhere. The job was flexible. I was just like fluid. And he very much kind of put my feet on the ground and really solidified me in the sense of giving me just like the day-to-day stability. So it was a really good, for lack of a better word, like slap in the face. So when him and I got together, it was in November, and I ended up moving in with him in February. So very, very quick in terms of going from just like casually dating to, hey, we're living together now. He had purchased this house in this quarter that he is on. He had purchased it from his parents when he was 18. And at that moment, it was kind of like the moment where I was just like, look at what he's accomplished at his age, and I'm nowhere near. He kind of just said, like, listen, I'll support you in what you want to do. Let's just talk it out. And I can distinctly remember this. I don't exactly remember what TV show we were watching, but it was end of November, beginning of December. And I remember looking at him and I was like, we've been together for 4 years. And he goes, yeah. And I said, like, I don't know if you know this, but I'm marrying you. Like, let me know if you would like to participate. And he kind of just chuckled and he's like, yeah, okay. Do you want to get married or like, do you want to have a kid? And I like looked at him and I was like, let's have a kid. And he's like, okay, let's do that. So then we started trying to start a family. My first and my second child are 14 and a half months apart. But after my son, it did really send me for a tailspin in the sense of like, I couldn't freely go outside and check my horses. I couldn't freely train or work or anything because one of the two or both of my kids were kind of freaking out. So at that point, I had kind of established a training business, a very small warm blood breeding business. I really wanted to kind of break way into that industry because that's the industry that I knew. And that dream pretty much got crushed overnight. And at the time, it was really hard for me to accept that. Now I'm like, oh, that was the best thing that happened. So once I finally sold all the horses, I really was lost. And I was like, what am I going to do? So at that point, Andrew suggested getting cows. And he goes, you really only have to be hands-on with them during calving season, which is 60 days. We can get someone in to help you with the kids during that 60 days while you are dealing with the cows. And the rest of the time, the kids can come with you in the tractor to feed, to bed, to do chores, all that jazz. And realistically, during calving, if the kids are with you, then the kids are with you. So that was the summer of 2017 was when I first bought my first group of 50 cow-calf pairs, and they were already bred to calve in 2018. So that's how it started. And then it's exploded.
In so many ways, with more children and more cows and all of the things.
Yes.
So what made you pick Simmental for your cattle?
So I actually honestly started with black cows because I thought they were the prettiest. And I thought, while sitting at the auction marts, kind of doing research and seeing what was selling good, what wasn't selling good, all this stuff, it was pretty apparent that black white face or red white face, trying to get that white face in there, those calves were just inherently bringing a little more. So at first, when I bought cow-calf pairs, they were just black cows. I don't know if they were Angus bred. I don't know if they were Simmental. I honestly don't know what they were. And then to bring in the red white face, I actually bought Hereford bulls. So that would give me my white face. And then if I got some red calves, then I got some red calves. At this point in time, a lot of my cows were also very, very mean. So seeing them coming was first priority. At that moment in time, I was like, well, what else has a red white face? And that's when I came across the Fleckvieh Simmentals. And then I really just fell in love with the Fleckvieh Simmentals as a whole. They're more of a European milk animal. So I was thinking increased size in calves and kind of just that venture. I can't honestly say if the Simmental breed specifically is superior to Angus or superior to Charolais or anything like that. I do think that a lot of it depends on what you're wanting out of your animals and what you're looking for. And I just went the Simmental route. So now I breed. All of my bulls that I use for breeding are full-blood Fleckviehs, and then I'm breeding them to my red and black Simmentals. So I'm getting really good mothers that are having good milk and good udders for like my replacement heifers. I'm getting the chrominess from the full bloods instead of just like the red and black solidness, which again, like if that's your flavor, then have at her. I just really like the chrominess of it. The main focus right now is the purebreds and the breeding and raising replacement heifers and then raising bull prospects for sale to, I know I'm not necessarily going to be in the running for selling to purebred breeders, but I do want to ultimately give a quality bull to some purebred guys, get some good weight growth and genetics, and just help them get some bigger calves as well. So yeah, that's kind of how that transitioned.
Yeah. So how do you decide which bulls or heifers to keep versus selling them?
So I probably do it very differently than others. I still have a lot of learning in this department to do for sure. I have a mentor through my CYL program that I applied for and joined, and we can chat about that later. But for me right now, what determines my replacement heifers is I track everything. So I track what their calving weight is. And then again, when they wean, I weigh them. So I have basically two kind of factors that I take into part. How big is the mother that raised this calf? And then how big is this calf? So as long as they are 50% of their mother's weight, they pass like phase 1 is what I call it. The next thing I do once I have my group of prospects that I'm going to keep for breeding purposes, I have my vet come out. And my vet will palpate them and kind of check them and do pelvic measurements. And I do pelvic measurements because I want to make sure that there is going to be enough room within their pelvis that they're going to be able to relatively easily calve out their first calf, and that it's not going to end up in a C-section. It's not going to end up in me having to help them or anything like that. And then I keep them through the winter. Through all of this, obviously, like I am looking at conformation, I am looking at attitude, I am looking at their feet and all the other stuff. So if they have a bad attitude, I don't keep them. If they're heads up and snorty, I don't keep them. If I walk in a pen, they're flighty or just anything, I don't keep them. So that's how I decide my females. My bulls are similar, but not the same. So my bulls, I will start deciding at calving. If they calve on their own, awesome. If they're over 100 pounds, the likelihood of them getting a band put on is pretty high. Not very many commercial breeders are willing to look at a bull prospect that has a birth weight that is over 100 pounds. If I've had to assist the mother during calving, whether it was like dystocia, which is like like malplacement, if I had to touch the cow during the calving process, that bull calf gets a band. And again, that might not always be the case, but that is how I operate right now. So then I take that bull group and they pasture together with their mothers. And then they also do follow kind of the same requisites as the females.
Yeah. Tell me more about your farm to table side of things. When did you start selling directly to customers?
I started with 4 or 5 animals, kind of to friends and family. I want to say that it was like 2018 that in my brain, I was like, why am I taking these animals to auction? Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. If they've got frozen ears or had a docked tail, like they're still the same size as the other calf, but you're getting paid less. And at the time I was just like, well, how about I keep these animals? I'll raise them myself for butcher. And then, financially, it won't be as big as an impact. So that was when I really offered the quarter, halves, and full cuts on a retail platform. We were still buying Smokies. We were still buying hot dogs. We were still buying all this stuff. So then I talked to my arbitrage and I said, hey, like, I know you guys offer this stuff. Can we make it? And can I retail sell it? And can we throw my name on it? And although like it is their recipe and it is their doing it, but it's ultimately my beef that's going into it. And they said, yep. So I was like, cool. So I did that. And then I started doing farmers markets and it blew up. So it started out with like 5 to 10 animals. It has grown to, I can't keep up with it. I have sold out for the last 3 years. I recently got a text message. They're like, hey, do you have any beef for your December butcher? And I was like, actually, no, I'm sold out for my December butcher in 2024. And I'm also sold out for my December butcher in 2025. So ultimately, for my 2025 meat sales, I need to be deciding what calves I'm keeping at weaning in the fall of 2024. That makes it also a little hard because in order to expand, you need new clients and new clientele and word of mouth. And I have been having really good word of mouth for 4 years. I've been having clientele for the last 4 years. And I tried to make sure that everybody that has previously bought does get the first dibs and all that stuff. But sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. So I've been at this 25 to 45 animal mark for a couple of years now. And this year was probably the biggest struggle for me to not keep everything back to background, because I very well could have, from a consumer point, from offering the farm to table beef program, from marketing and selling it, I could have easily sold 50 or more of my animals for butcher in 2025. Where I struggled and where I decided not to keep very many steers was because I want to keep my prices affordable. So with what calf prices were at this year selling them to what I would have had to put to get it to the butcher state, plus the cost of cut and wrap, like marketing, anything like that, I did not feel fair or justified charging my customers that price. Because at the end of the day, a full cow would have cost them $6,000 or $7,000. Which, although that's your meat for a year, I really struggled with that. But that's what cattle prices are at right now, sort of thing. So I calculate it as it's kind of fluid. So if I were to have sold my steers today at auction, I would have got, let's say, $2,500 for them. A couple years ago, a 535-pound steer was like $1,100. Ultimately, somebody has to pay for that cost differential. And I really morally struggled with trying to sell that in 2 years' time. For me, because I do want everything born and raised on farm, that is a little bit more planning, but then it's also reflective. So, for example, next year, if the cattle prices at the auction tank and drop and the grocery store prices come down, but my price for that animal is still going to be reflective of last year's pricing, is that fair to the customer? So some of them would say yes, but when getting new customers, it's a big hurdle for to make the transition from a grocery store steak to a farm steak. Once the transition is made, I feel like, the quality of it will speak for itself. But it is a hard transition to make. And then again, the flip side of it is you're asking for a large chunk of money to get put down at one lump sum. I'm not trying to get rich off other people's hard-earned money. I am trying to make it an affordable health choice.
There are so many complexities when it comes really like to the bottom line of agriculture. And like you said, at every step, has to be money made somewhere eventually, or there is no more step there. That step is taken out. But I love that, the passion that you have for your animals and really feeding your community and your customers, the quality that you are making is so important. And obviously, it's a really fine line of wanting to do what essentially could, be very beneficial for your family and the farm and finances and everything, but also thinking about a consumer in that way is, I'm sure they thank you for that. Or they don't even realize that like this is the thing that you're thinking about when you are making the decisions, whether you are keeping or selling, whether you're processing or not, or bringing in other animals. So,
well, and that's, I have been told by many people, they said like, What's stopping you from just buying animals and then backgrounding them and calling them yourselves? And, like, nobody's going to know. How are they going to know? And ethically, like me, I just can't, I can't do that. I just want to be transparent and I want to be honest. And I think some of that comes from growing up in the city, not knowing everything that goes into it. And right now, a big thing with people, as I'm sure everybody is kind of aware, they want to be hormone-free, antibiotic-free, all that stuff. And I do take a lot of time educating and explaining. Like, we personally don't use hormones, but I'm not opposed to myself eating a steak or a roast or whatever off of somebody who does do hormones. I'm not opposed to it, because by the time that animal gets to 2 years, that last hormone injection that they can technically get has been out of their system for, if not a year, very close to a year. Just anywhere. If you are ultimately getting beef from your table or onto your table, it has not had medication in a set amount of time, because it can't be. So,
right. Yep. And honestly, it's just having those conversations and hearing it from the producer's standpoint of it. And that's why, we can make the argument that farmers don't have time, ranchers don't have time to market and to say these things. And really, honestly, we don't. You have 1 million children. You don't got time to do all of this, but it is important. And just to have that simple conversation of being, like you said, if you want to buy something that hasn't had antibiotics and that hasn't had anything, you can buy that. People will sell that to you. There's those options. And I think as consumers, we're all consumers, and it's such a privilege to have those options. Join women passionate about agriculture and food at the upcoming Advancing Women in Agriculture Conference being held on March 16th through 18th at the Hyatt Regency in Calgary, Alberta. The Advancing Women in Agriculture Conference is created for every woman who is passionate about agriculture and food, whether you are a university student studying agriculture, a producer, entrepreneur, representative of a growers association, or corporate agribusiness. AWC has a proven track record of bringing women in agriculture and food together from across Canada and parts of the U.S. AWC is proud of the quality of speakers that are brought to the podium, including business experts, motivational and inspirational leaders, industry representatives, and farmers just like you. I'll be there hosting mini interviews at the AWC 2025 West Conference. So join us in sharing your story as well as learning from other amazing women in agriculture. For more information and to register, head to advancingwomenconference.ca or the link in today's show notes. I want to get to the mentorship piece that you had been mentioning. Obviously, having a mentor in an industry that relatively new at is a good thing. So
yes.
Tell us about the mentorship piece of what's happening for you.
Yes. So when I first got into cattle, my mentor was the neighbor down the road. She was a dairy farmer. Her mentorship to me was priceless. We lost her to cancer 6 years ago, and I reflect on everything that she has told me, on everything that she's taught me, and everything I learned from her on a weekly basis. So I was very fortunate to have her as a mentor. I was also very fortunate to have her sister and brother-in-law. They are purebred breeders in Fraser Lake, BC. They're Copper Tea Ranch. They have Herefords. They have also been really good mentors in animal husbandry and sticking with my core beliefs and not necessarily letting the industry influence my decisions and not letting the industry push me into the sway or process of how things are done, and to kind of go back to like, this is your operation. How do you want to run it? Okay, let's talk about the most efficient things to run it. And then when I was at the Advancing Women's Conference in Calgary, Carlene Yakimichuk spoke about the Canadian Cattle Young Leaders Program. And I was feeling just very empowered coming out of that conference and feeling so like I could conquer the world and I could take it on and that I could just exceed. So I applied for the Canadian Cattle Young Leaders Program, or the CYL program, and I got accepted as a semifinalist. I was one of the 24 semifinalists. And then from there, they narrowed down the 24 finalists down to 16. So I also was very blessed that I am one of the finalists, one of the 16. So my mentor is Deanne and her husband, Rob Young. And I have silently Facebook stalked Deanne and Rob for a couple years. So I was just absolutely thrilled to have them be my mentors. I went to Farm Fair International. I have never been humbled so quickly walking from the back of a barn to the front of a barn in my entire life, because those show cattle are next level, exceptional, absolutely incredible, amazing cattle. Holy cow. But, Deanne said, I don't necessarily have to have cattle that look like this to be a successful purebred breeder. So that was just already a good experience. I just got my mentor. I just found out who she was a couple weeks ago. I knew she was going to be busy getting ready for Farm Fair. I was busy with the tallow getting ready for Farm Fair. So we had a quick little 2-hour conversation on the phone. And then I met with her in the show barns. And we're going to touch base here in the next week or so. And really just to bounce off ideas. You were asking about how I select my heifers. And that's how I do it. So, asking her, hey, like, how do you do your heifer selection? How are you picking your cattle for breeding? How are you picking your bull prospects? Like, am I and my mentality parallel to the industry standard? Because again, being born and raised in the city, I have no idea. I thought belted Galloways were super cute, and apparently not.
I just think that having a mentor in a space that you have so much passion about is one of the greatest gifts that you can have. And the fact that there are people in our industry that are willing to be so transparent with what they know and give you that gift of knowledge, I just think when I think of other industries, is mentorship the same way? Is mentorship handled the same way? Is there that piece where there's still maybe that competition mindset of, I can't give away my secrets because, I can't give the secret 11 herbs and spices because they will take it away from me. But, having a mentor, and honestly, to have women in our industry that are strong mentors I think we're pretty lucky and we're pretty special for that.
Yes, 100%. I feel very blessed to not only have a mentor, but also having a female mentor in it, because she is also going to understand the balance of not only working and operating a farm, but also needing to set aside time to be a mother. And I do think my previous experience coming into the cattle industry very much was like, nobody talks to anybody. You ask how calving season was and they say, oh, it was good. It's a very tight sealed box that nobody wants to let anybody else know. Whereas again, me as a person, I'm the complete opposite. I'm like, yeah, we calved 100 and I lost 5. One was to pneumonia and one was just born dead. And one, I'm very open and want to have those conversations because that's how we all learn, and I'm not a gatekeeper. I'm a pretty transparent person in all of my dealings, in my cow-calf operation, in my farm-to-table beef program, in my newly developed tallow business that I started. I kind of chuckle because I ran into a tallow company at a trade show this year, but I asked them, I was like, how do you guys render your tallow? like most efficiently. I want to make sure I'm doing it in the most efficient way. And if there's a better way out there, I would love to know about it. At which point they responded with, well, that's a proprietorship. And I kind of had a moment where I was like, I didn't realize the rendering tallow itself was a proprietorship. I was pretty sure there was only 2 ways to do it, which is like wet render, dry render. I just wanted to know if you found like a pot that helps like bigger batches, or when I'm straining it, that it's a little bit more efficient straining. But so I kind of giggled at that, and I had a moment of hilarity. And ultimately, the specific ingredients are listed on the back of the containers, so you can tell what's in it. My ratio, that I will keep a secret, because that's, that's the secret trade, and that's what makes it special. But getting from the fat off the cow to the rendered product, yeah, I'll teach everybody how to do that. But there is a lot of the competitiveness and the closed doorness. But I am very fortunate to have found the CYL program, to have found my mentor, and to found a group of people that just really help continue to empower and push all of my business decisions and all of my adventures and avenues.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm so excited for you and for that growth that's going to happen from that. Second last question for you. Looking back now, what advice would you give young farmer Ashley from where you started to where you are today in your cattle operation, in farming?
For a long time, I said, if I could go back and tell myself anything, it would be don't do kids and cows at the same time. And now that my youngest is 4, now I'm like, okay, it actually wasn't that bad. I could do kids and cows together at the same time. It's not a big deal. But when they were younger, it was hard. And I think the advice that I would give myself in that time would be just keep pushing, keep going, never stop learning, never stop striving for excellence, never stop asking questions. Knowledge is power. And I know that that's something we've all heard, and it's kind of one of those like, yeah, okay, that sounds corny. But the reality is, the more that I've learned, the more that I've educated myself, the more that I've put myself out there, the more that I have gotten in return. This entire journey for me, AWC West really kicked off a whole new side to me that I didn't even really realize was in there. It was a radio show that a girlfriend called in, and she was saying how amazing this person was, how amazing this farmer was, and how incredible, and she's a go-getter, she's doing this all. And my husband sent me the video, the voice clip, and when I listened to it, that was when I realized she was talking about me. And at that point, I realized that what I was doing could inspire others who are also maybe struggling. So I really wanted to just share my story and share my journey. And yeah, it was hard. It was financially hard. It was emotionally hard. It was physically hard. But I really just surrounded myself with a very supportive group between my husband, my in-laws, and my friends. And I heard other people say this throughout the years, and I never tangibly thought it was worth anything. But mood boards or memory boards, or just write down your goals. What do you want? Do you want a 50 cow calf operation? Okay. How do we get there? So writing down the goals and then putting the money into it up front. I cannot tell you how much money I lost or wasted on not getting quality animals or not having a quality facility. I bought auction mark cows that were pregnant, that were a dime in the bucket, and in the long run, 1,000% I paid for it. Whereas if I would have bought from a reputable breeder, whether that's purebred or commercial, if I would have put in more money out up front, I would have been farther ahead. So Like that would be, if I could go back, it would be to pay for the good cattle, invest the money up front, and it will come back to you down the road. But I was very short-sighted. I'm going to spend this money this year, and I'm going to get these calves next year, and I'm going to get this paycheck next year, and I'm going to have made my money in a calendar year. And I very much regret that mentality, because I do think in the long run that did hold me back more than propel me forward. The other advice is just, keep pushing, don't give up. It's tough. It's an uphill battle, but keep pushing.
So good. Okay. And the last question.
Oh, the biggest one.
Ashley, what is the most rewarding part for you in being a farmer, being a rural woman?
I am free. And I know that kind of sounds weird, but I am free to do what I want, ultimately. I can have my garden. I can have my kids. I can have my cows. I am not held to a societal standard. I can do what I want. I can make the decisions that I want, and I'm not put in a box. And that was something growing up in this city, I never realized that I was in a box. It's not necessarily a bad thing, for anybody who is born and raised in a city, that's not necessarily a bad lifestyle if that's the lifestyle you want. But I am not controlled by anything. 9 times out of 10, I don't know what day of the week it is. 9 times out of 10, especially in the summertime, I don't know when, quiet time is, or no noise, or you know what I mean? I'm free. We can do, we can dirt bike, we can get quads, I can teach my kids about the farming. All of my children, they know how to drive the equipment. Some of them are better than others. Obviously, my 4-year-old, she ain't great at the whole steering wheel thing. But every single one of my children taught themselves how to ride a pedal bike, because we just had a pedal bike here. And at any point in time, they could go outside. I wasn't worried about, them playing on the street or hanging out in a mall or whatever. They've gone and collected frogs and brought frogs in my house. This summer, we had a goose that hung around, whatever, cool. So just the ability to just come and go as I please, ultimately do what we want within reason, obviously. But there is just a sense of freedom. And then there's also, it is so overwhelmingly joyful when you can plant a garden and then you're feeding your family with that garden, and you're raising chickens and butchering chickens, and it's just a freeing. I don't know how else to explain it. That would, for me, is the most amazing feeling.
It is. And it's hard to explain. I leave the hardest question for last. Put into words why your life is so wonderful.
Right? Yeah, and honest to God, I just I couldn't imagine ever being in a city ever again in my life.
Yep, you're hooked now. So good. Ashley, it has been such a pleasure getting to hear you speak about your passion, your love for farming, all of the things. For listeners who would like to connect with you after the show, where can they find you online?
Yeah, so I'm kind of everywhere. I am on Facebook, so either Ashley Perepelkin or Perepelkin Farms. Feel free, do both. Instagram, Perepelkin Farms, TikTok, Perepelkin Farms, and of course our website is perepelkinfarms.ca.
Perfect. And I will link all of those in the show notes so people can find you and connect with you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for sharing your story with us today. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks for listening to the Rural Woman Podcast. The Rural Woman Podcast is more than just a podcast. We are a community. A huge thank you to the Rural Woman Podcast team, audio editor Max Hofer. A special thanks to our Patreon executive producers, Sarah Riedner from Happiness by the Acre and Carrie Munven from Laystone Farms. To learn how you can become a Patreon executive producer or other ways to financially support the show, head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen to the podcast to get the latest episodes directly on your playlist. And if you are loving the show, please be sure to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other platform that accepts ratings and reviews. You can connect with us on social media at The Rural Woman Podcast and with me at Wild Rose Farmer. One of the best ways you can support the show is by sharing it. Send this episode to a friend or share on your social media. Let's strengthen and amplify the voices of women in agriculture together. Until next time, my friend, keep sharing your story. Did you know that you can get this same great episode of the Rural Woman Podcast ad-free? I get it. Listening to ads during a podcast isn't always my favorite either. But in order to keep the lights and coffee pot on here at the Rural Woman Podcast Studios, they are necessary. I am so grateful to each and every one of my sponsors, but if you yourself would like to skip the ads while supporting the show, consider joining me over on Patreon. Patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast get ad-free episodes starting at Tier 5 on their podcast player of choice each week, plus some other great benefits. Find out more by heading to the link in today's show notes to learn how you can become a patron through Patreon.